Ballsy Thinking, the gender agnostic antidote to sloppy thinking. Are UK GPs taking the P? Well, I suppose it depends on what P you're talking about. But let's face it, the GPs are the gateway, the gatekeepers to the NHS in the UK, the National Health Service, and their role has changed. When I used to go to the GP when I was a kid, my mother used to put on a clean pair of underpants, even though I might only be going because I've got a sore throat. Inevitably, the GP would stick his hand up my crotch, ask me to turn my head and cough.
Big cough.
But those are the old days. At least I got to see that GP in person. That GP also may come and see me at home if I was sick. So frankly, GPs then were held up as being pillars of the community. You know, people who are respected because of, what they did in the community and the fact that they were an integral part of the community. Nowadays, who the heck knows? You may never even see the same GP again, or you may not even know the name of your GP. I can remember my GP's name, even as a kid, Dr. Russell, who used to be well known in the community. So it's a changing role for GPs. The fact is their terms and conditions have also changed. Right now, it's only just been disclosed that the average wage for a GP is over £100,000. Okay, and there's shortages. It's said that there might be 10 to 20,000 shortage of GPs during the course of the next 10 years. So clearly something is going very wrong. And what are the main reasons for this? Well, firstly, I think the GPs have definitely got themselves a cushy number. The fact is, the negotiated settlement when they got a huge wage increase in 2006, 7 and 8 with Patricia Hewitt meant that they also got a huge bump up in their pensions. And of course the increase in salary, they have defined pension contributions, which a lot of people in the state sector have. And defined pension contributions are usually based on your final salary of when you actually leave the profession, and you get a pension which is commensurate or a percentage of what you're earning. Now of course a lot of GPs nowadays are self-employed, or they're directly employed by the NHS or by a particular practice, because we've opened up to allowing practices to become small businesses, and that can all be good. But a lot of them are working only 3.5 days a week or 3 days a week. So many are working part-time. They complain about the fact that there is just paperwork to be done. But when you go to see a GP, the fact is a lot of the entries that they make are directly onto your patient record. And so therefore they're typed in. They may need that extra minute once they've seen you to type in the findings that they've had from seeing you, or if you're on a Zoom call, they haven't even had to leave their desk. They do the call, turn back to their PC and can take notes. Now of course the practice may have lots of different regulations that they need to have, which is why you have practice managers, you have business development managers nowadays in these practices. But the GPs themselves just don't seem to understand that just giving a diagnosis is fine, but the data is what we can really use to help make the NHS a much better place to be a part of for patients, and can track them all the way through. Although historically, as you well know, the NHS have actually made a complete horlicks of a lot of the big IT developments, and have wasted literally hundreds of millions on these development programs. It's been suggested that GPs themselves, because they're earning so much money, should have personal assistants. Well, that is what the technology and the people in the practices should be used for, to help them just to focus on the diagnostics and everything else that they need to do to enhance patient care. Other things we might do to help the GPs would be is up to us. There's suggestions that if you make an appointment with a GP and don't turn up, you should be fined £10. That's got to be a good idea. But then again, if you look at the data, how many people don't turn up for a GP during the course of a day? If it's, say, 10%, well, that surely gives a little bit more time to do the paperwork that they're completely, they're always moaning about. The issue of pandemic is obviously quite important. They are the front line when there's an issue of illness, and if during a pandemic just like the one we've had they feel threatened or they feel stressed, we need to help them with that. But that's why we started to do Zoom calls. That's why we started to do video calls for GPs as opposed to people turning up. And there's only a certain amount of people who really probably need to be seen, and that is the diagnostic session that a GP needs to have online or through a camera, and then can decide whether or not they need to see the patient. And so it's all down to the quality of the GPs. The education of GPs is really important too. The government's been absolutely crazy. They've been underspending on GP education and on doctor education, and they need to make it. They need to have innovative finance plans. So if the GP, for example, stays in the NHS and works full-time as a GP in the NHS after getting their degree and after qualifying as a GP, their education might be written off, and the public sector might actually take on that cost. And the reason for that, of course, is that it's a return on investment for society if a GP actually does his work in the community, probably for the GP as well, because the GP may very well find that he or she gets greater knowledge and experience than just getting qualified and then going off somewhere to make a huge amount of money in the private sector, or as a doctor abroad, such as the US or Australia or so on, which is where, of course, a lot of our doctors end up earning money in the private sector. So the question really does come, there are issues with their pensions right now, although they're getting cracking good pensions, and the fact is they are, as I said, there's defined benefit pensions. Some of them are bumping up against a cap, which I think is 1.2 million in terms of their pension pots, and so therefore don't get the benefits of their pensions if they stay on. But a lot of them are also retiring at 50, and they're retiring at 50 because they've got enough in their pension, their defined pension, in order to do that. They do not share the risks, the majority of them, as we do for people who invest in what the Americans would call a 401k, or indeed a pension that's invested and then has to make a return. So these type of things, the sort of ballsy thinking as it relates to GPs, and standing firm really against some of their demands, when possibly they should actually, we should definitely, like we should with all the rest of the public sector people, we should definitely be changing defined pensions, because at the moment it's absolutely clear that GPs are taking the P, and that P is pensions, is the key to sorting out the NHS and indeed the GP people who are at the front line of the National Health Service. Thanks for listening to this Ballsy Brief, where we take a topic and try to apply unorthodox or common sense thinking to something which is a matter of public concern. If you've liked it, please give us a lick and subscribe.